Towards the end of the 1940s, the US Navy recognized that it was going to need a new, clean-sheet designed swept-wing jet fighter to compete with land-based fighters that were likely to enter service in the coming years. They correctly predicted several developments of the early jet era and anticipated their need for something new to replace the F-2H Banshee and its derivatives. A design competition was held starting in 1948, with 6 companies submitting proposals. The design for McDonnell was larger than previous fighters and was designed around the new Westinghouse J40 engine that promised a major upgrade in performance over previous engine designs. The Navy liked McDonnell's new plane and issued a contract in late 1949 to build a couple of prototypes for testing. After the US encountered the MiG-15 in Korea, the Navy's need for a next-generation swept-wing fighter gained a new sense of urgency. But unfortunately, McDonnell was running into a pretty major problem. The Westinghouse J40 engine just wasn't ready. The J40s they had been given barely worked, and when they did work, they underperformed. Add to this, the Navy had added some more requirements onto the plane, which meant more weight. Well, to make a much longer side story very short, they ended up ditching the J40 engine and had to use alternatives with lower power. The Allison J71 was chosen, but flight testing of some early production planes, which was now designated the F3H Demon, showed it to be seriously underpowered and unable to meet most of its design goals. However, despite these issues, the Navy pushed forward anyway for several reasons. The big one was that the Demon was a large plane, and they wanted a jet that could fit a large-sized air intercept radar along with a set of newly developed air-to-air missiles. The F3H entered service in 1956, along with its new radar and missiles, and saw several upgrades in the first few years of its service life. The plane never saw combat and had continual troubles until it was finally retired in 1964, and really served mostly as an evolutionary design. A little over 500 of them were built. What we get in War Thunder is the F3H-2 Demon, a naval jet fighter in rank 6 of the American tech tree at battle rating 9.0. This jet carries the AN/APQ-51 radar. This is actually a very capable radar set for this BR, with ACM and BVR targeting. Fairly good range and detection, again, for this BR. However, the scope ranges are very inconvenient. It jumps from 19 to 93 kilometers with nothing in between. For loadouts, this jet can take up to 4 air-to-air missiles or a pretty wide selection of dumb bombs and Mighty Mouse rocket pods in different combinations. The M118 3,000-pound bomb is especially nasty for close air support. For missiles, you start off with the basic AIM-9B. This is a rear-aspect cage-seeker infrared missile with entry-level performance best used within 2 kilometers. As always, it's pretty easy to dodge. You also get the AIM-7C. This is a semi-active radar missile, but frankly, it's one of the worst. It doesn't track well, it doesn't turn well, and it's really only effective against head-on targets within 7 or 8 kilometers. Oh, it too is pretty easy to dodge. I discuss the AIM-7C in more detail later. The flight performance of the F3H-2 is, well, this is why it's at BR 9.0. In short, just like it was in real life, it's horribly underpowered. The acceleration isn't good, and the energy retention in particular is pretty awful. Now, it's not all a big pile of shit though. There are a few gold nuggets, but they're unpleasant to dig for. First, the F3H can get some pretty respectable instantaneous turn rate and AOA, especially with its leading-edge slats that are linked to the combat flap controls. This can allow you to really quickly swing the nose around for a missile shot or a gun solution at the start of an engagement. But you might not want to. Now, as I mentioned, the energy retention is really bad, so while you can get a good AOA turn out of this thing, you can't really sustain it, and in most situations you're only going to get 1 or 2 maneuvers before the F3H-2 just runs out of steam. Combined with its awful acceleration, this means that ideally you almost want to fly this thing like an F-104. Get fast and stay fast. Now, I know I'm not showing much of that in the footage. Again, I picked the footage to include to try and show off the quirks of the plane, and also to at least be slightly entertaining, not just to show off ideal gameplay over and over, which can get kind of boring in a jet like this. But again, in an ideal situation, you want to build up some speed at the start of a match and try to keep it as long as possible. If you get sucked into dogfights, you might never get that energy back, so don't hesitate to just try and disengage and separate away for 7, 8, 10 kilometers before turning back for another attack pass. This is especially true if you're trying to set up missile shots. I also want to take a moment and remind you about the insane penalty you're going to get to the flight performance if you fly this thing out loaded up with bombs. This is one of the first jets that can take, well, a pretty significant amount of air-to-ground ordnance. Just remember that if you fly this thing out as a bomb truck with like 4,000 pounds of ordnance or something, it's going to take everything I just talked about and make it a lot worse. Now, when you take the F3H-2 into air battles, you should prepare for a bit of a culture shock. It's got a completely different playstyle from the F9F family that's before it in the tech tree. The first thing I want to talk about are the AIM-7C missiles, since this is very likely the first jet you're going to fly in the American tech tree that has any kind of semi-active radar missiles. In short, the AIM-7C is awful. It's one of the worst missiles in the game. The stat card is highly misleading, and it's listed as having Mach 3 speed, but in reality it's got awful delta V and loses most of its energy very quickly. Worse still, it won't really start tracking until about 2 seconds after you fire it, which is around when the booster runs out. So most of its maneuvering potential is left on the table. What this means is that it's only really useful in head-on shots against targets at medium range coming right at you that aren't maneuvering. Its effective range in a tail chase is kind of similar to an AIM-9B. It's very short, and it's basically incapable of hitting a maneuvering target, even in ideal circumstances. As you can see in the footage I included, the AIM-7C is for medium to high altitude head-on shots. That's really it. Now, in terms of more conventional air combat, I personally suck at aiming the Colt 20mm on this thing, but if you can connect a burst, they do pretty reasonable damage. Try not to engage in twisting dogfights where the bad energy retention will be a huge problem, as you can see in some of the footage I included. And keep in mind that this jet has a reputation for being awful, so if the other team sees you and it looks like you're slow, expect to get dogpiled. Again, the footage I included was to try and show a variety of tactics, but ideally you want to use this for sort of a high-speed interception style of gameplay in most circumstances. In terms of ground attack, you might be tempted to try and use this as a base bomber in air battles because of its huge weapon load, but don't. You're not fast enough to get to the bases before your teammates, and you're too slow to evade interception. Now, in a close air support role, the rocket pods or the 3,000-pound bomb are probably your best options, but no ballistics computer, so again, you're at a disadvantage there too. Visually, well, the F3H is kind of a fugly-looking jet. None of the parts of the plane really seem to fit the other parts, and it almost looks like it was cobbled together from 3 different Lego kits or something. Either way, you get one US Navy paint job, and that's it. Landing the F3H-2 isn't too difficult, but remember, it is a heavy jet with low engine power, so you might need to ride the throttle on your way in, depending on how your approach starts. We actually have ships on some of the air battle maps now, so you might even get to do a carrier landing. You can put the gear out at around 450 kilometers an hour, and the flaps at about 370. The jet's cockpit is a little odd. It offers good visibility and the radar scope is in a decent spot, but you sit offset slightly to the left. It's weird and I really never got used to it in VR. To close out on the F3H-2 Demon. This jet gets semi-active radar missiles at a very low BR, it has a good radar set, it can take a pretty heavy overall weapon load, and it can do carrier stuff. However, It's just plain underpowered. It's got awful energy retention. The radar scope has really inconvenient range settings. Its missiles are not great, and it tends to get focused and dogpiled because of its bad reputation. The final verdict on the F3H-2 is that this jet is really underappreciated. It's not especially good, but it's not the pile of garbage everyone thinks it is at its current BR. But even still, it mostly serves as a stepping stone to better jets in the tech tree. As always, thanks for watching, and if you like this video, check out this next one.